So I want you to just um, imagine spending 150 quid on a match ticket.
Right, which is a lot of money right off the bat.
Exactly. And then you add on another 100 for the train down from Merseyside.
Yeah.
You spend hours jammed into a cramped carriage.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You're navigating your way through a hostile city under this miserable gray April sky. And you take your seat in the away end at the Etihad.
The away end is always intense.
Right. And you sing your lungs out for 45 minutes. I mean, you completely drown out the home fans. You do your job.
Because that's what away fans do, right? They bring the energy.
Exactly. But in return, you have to watch your team's 80 million pound striker cheerfully swap shirts with a Manchester City defender in the middle of the pitch.
Wow. During the match.
During the actual game.
Yeah.
While you are currently losing 4-0.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it is the ultimate violation of the unwritten contract between a football club and its supporters.
It really is. It's not just a bad day at the office. It's a spark that ignites a completely toxic collapse.
Yeah.
So today, we're taking you into the fallout of exactly that moment.
We really need to unpack this.
We do. We are unpacking the raw, agonizing erosion of Liverpool Football Club in April 2026, because that match in question, that humiliating 4-0 FA Cup quarterfinal defeat to Manchester City, it broke something.
It absolutely did. And we are not looking at this through the sanitized lens of club PR statements right
No,
here.
definitely not.
Our sources today are the raw, unfiltered community reactions. We're talking massive Reddit threads, post-match press quotes from Arne Slot to the BBC and TNT Sports.
All press quotes are wild.
They really are. And yes, we also have the highly gleeful, schadenfreude-filled reactions from rival fan bases like Arsenal and Manchester United.
We are tracking the anatomy of a sporting collapse in real time. Because for those of you listening who remember the Jürgen Klopp era, the mantra was doubters to believers.
Right. It was this cult of absolute visceral emotional investment.
Exactly. So today, our mission is to map exactly how that psychological progress gets completely inverted. How do you go from mentality monsters to a squad that looks completely dead inside?
Managed by a guy who honestly sounds more like a forensic accountant than a football manager.
Oh, totally. Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to jump straight into that moment I just described at the Etihad away end. A mass exodus of Liverpool fans starting around the 58th minute is not normal.
No, it's completely anomalous. I mean, in the ecosystem of English football, the traveling away support is the most radical, fiercely loyal contingent of a fan base.
They really are.
They pride themselves on staying until the final whistle, especially when the team is losing. It's an act of defiance,
Oh, so it's like a badge of honor.
Exactly. So walking out with 30 minutes left to play is a physical withdrawal of consent. It's thousands of people simultaneously deciding you are no longer representing us.
Right. And let me push back on the usual narrative here, because the easy headline is just, fans walk out because it's 4-0 and Haaland just scored a hat trick.
Sure, that's what the papers will say.
But looking at the community threads, the anger wasn't really about the scoreline, was it? I mean, they'd taken heavy beatings before and stayed.
Exactly. The scoreline is just a symptom. The walkout was a protest against the disease itself. Fans can tolerate a tactical outclassing by Pep Guardiola.
That happens.
But what they cannot stomach is the complete apathy they witnessed on the pitch. It's the manner of the defeat.
Right, the body language.
Yes. Conceding that brutal killer goal to Haaland in first half stoppage time, which has been a recurring nightmare for the squad all season, that was bad. But it was the dropped shoulders afterward, the total lack of bite in the midfield.
Which brings us back to Hugo Ekitiké and the shirt swap that essentially broke the internet. Let's break down exactly what happened here.
Oh, this was staggering.
The team is down 4-0. Ekitiké is getting substituted. And instead of walking off with his head down, he swaps shirts with a City player on the pitch. And the BBC Club radio commentary specifically noted he was doing this while completely ignoring frantic instructions from assistant coach Pep Lijnders on the touchline.
I mean, in modern football, the shirt swap is a gesture of mutual respect.
Yeah.
But it's usually reserved for the tunnel or the final whistle.
Exactly. Not mid-game.
Doing it mid-game during a historic humiliation against a direct rival, it just shows a staggering detachment from the reality of the situation.
It really does.
It signals to the fans that the player doesn't feel the weight of the moment at all. The fans in the stands are apoplectic, their entire weekend is ruined, and he's treating a competitive quarterfinal like a preseason friendly kickabout.
He completely bypassed the emotional state of the club. I look at that and think, how do you even begin to manage a player who lacks that fundamental situational awareness.
It's incredibly difficult.
But he wasn't the only one who completely misread the room. We really have to talk about Dominic Szoboszlai, because this is a guy who has arguably been one of their few bright sparks this season. But during this match, he is visibly throwing his arms up, shrugging at the away supporters in frustration.
Yeah, blaming the crowd.
And then, in the fallout, he posts or tells the press to, quote, "Stick with us because we are a family."
And that specific use of the word family is what detonated the remaining goodwill in the community. It's just a classic PR misstep.
Huge misstep.
You cannot invoke the concept of family to demand unconditional support when the basic fundamental requirements of commitment on the pitch are just completely absent. The fans felt incredibly gaslit by that.
I read one fan's comment that just perfectly encapsulated this feeling. They said, "We don't expect you to win every game, but we expect you to bleed for the badge."
That's the baseline.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's like paying top dollar to see an elite orchestra. You sit down, and the violinists are out of tune, the conductor's staring at his phone, and the brass section is just loudly chatting with each other.
That's a great way to picture it.
And then, when the crowd starts booing, the first violinist has the audacity to stand up and shout, "Hey, we're a family, you need to clap."
Exactly.
How can a player pulling in 6 figures a week demand emotional labor from the fans when the baseline requirement, just pure effort, isn't there?
It's a brilliant analogy because it highlights the breakdown of performance versus expectation. And, the tracking data actually supports the fans' eye test here.
Oh, really? The data backs it up.
Yeah, the community isn't just reacting emotionally, they are reacting to a measurable drop in intensity. It's not that the players are physically incapable of running, their top sprint speeds haven't drastically dropped.
Okay.
It's their reaction time to turnovers. Under Klopp, if they lost the ball, the counter press was triggered in milliseconds.
Right, the heavy metal football.
Exactly. But under Arne Slot, a turnover happens, and there is a visible 1 to 2 second hesitation. Should I press? Should I drop back?
And that hesitation is a killer.
That hesitation is exactly where Manchester City destroyed them.
Well, let's pivot exactly to that hesitation, because you don't get players wandering around a pitch looking lost, swapping shirts and shrugging at fans, unless the tactical framework above them has completely dissolved.
Right, it starts at the top.
We need to look at Arne Slot, the architect of this specific brand of misery.
This is where we get a fascinating, albeit terrifying, psychological profile of how a leader communicates during a full-blown crisis.
It's bad, isn't it?
Oh, Slot's post-match comments to the BBC and TNT Sports are a masterclass in how to entirely alienate a highly emotional group of stakeholders.
Let me read his exact framing. Slot comes out after a 4-0 thrashing. He blames a, quote, 20-minute spell for the 4 goals.
Just a spell.
Right. And he focuses heavily on the team's failure to convert their own expected goals, citing Mohamed Salah's missed penalty. And he concludes by saying the performance was not up to the standard of Liverpool.
Which prompted the immediate furious response from the fan base, which was, "This is your standard." He is attempting to artificially distance himself from the wreckage. He's pointing to the historical badge as if he is a mere observer. But the fans are vehemently reminding him that he has been in charge for nearly 2 full seasons now.
You didn't just walk in the door last week.
No, the apathy, the tactical confusion, the hesitation, he built this reality.
Let's dig into the tactical reality he built, because the community has given it a deeply sarcastic nickname.
Oh, the nicknames are brutal.
They call it Vegan Ball or Passback FC. The memes in these Reddit threads are ruthless. They call Liverpool a sustainable football club because they just endlessly recycle possession without actually creating anything dangerous.
Sustainable football club, that's hard.
It is. But beyond the jokes, I really want to know the mechanics of Vegan Ball. Why does the team look so toothless?
Well, vegan ball is basically a derogatory term for possession without penetration. Let's break down the mechanics.
Okay, let's hear it.
Under Klopp, the fullbacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson, they bombed forward on the outside to create wide overloads, right? They whipped crosses in at terrifying speeds.
Right, it was relentless.
But Arne Slot comes from a school of thought that prioritizes central control. He instructs his fullbacks to invert into the midfield. But here is the fatal flaw.
What is it?
Liverpool's current center backs lack the recovery pace to cover the massive wide spaces left behind when those fullbacks invert.
Ah, so the players know they are exposed.
Exactly. The players are acutely aware that if they lose the ball high up the pitch, the counterattack will be lethal.
So what happens?
They become incredibly risk-averse. Instead of attempting a through ball that might get intercepted, the midfielder turns around and passes it safely back to the center back.
Right.
The center back passes it to the other center back. The ball just moves in a giant, sterile U-shape around the perimeter of the opponent's defensive block. It's possession as a defensive mechanism, not an attacking one.
Wow. But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If we look at the data, and Slot obviously loves his data, doesn't this control-based system theoretically reduce the opponent's chances?
In theory, yes.
Because Slot argued in the press conference that City actually didn't create much between going 1-0 up and 2-0 up. He was heavily relying on the XG, the expected goals metric, to say the game was closer than 4-0. Mathematically, over a 38-game season, isn't that logic sound?
Mathematically, yes, variance exists. Over a long season, it might balance out. Psychologically, though, in a knockout cup tie against a team like Manchester City, it is entirely suicidal.
Right, it's a completely different context.
And one fan in the threads absolutely dismantled Slot's XG defense with the quote that I honestly think belongs in a footballing textbook.
Oh, I know exactly the quote you mean. Let's lay it out for the listener.
So a reporter had pressed Slot on the players failing to do the basics. Slot deflected, saying City didn't have chances for a 20-minute window. And this fan furiously wrote, "At the highest level of football, you have to track 15 runs. You have to block 15 crosses. You have to make 15 clearances. Top teams punish you for slacking off even once."
That is just such a profound understanding of elite sports.
It completely exposes the flaw in Slot's thinking. Slot views a 20-minute defensive lapse as a statistical blip. You know, a slight deviation in the data set.
Like it doesn't matter.
Right. But the fan understands the visceral truth of the Premier League. If you fall asleep and fail to track Erling Haaland's run into the box just one time out of 15, you lose the match.
Exactly.
You cannot play vegan ball for 80 minutes, switch off for 10 minutes, and expect to survive. Elite teams don't need sustained pressure to kill you. They just need you to blink.
It points to a manager who is trying to solve a raging house fire with a spreadsheet.
That's exactly what it looks like.
One commenter said Slot has mastered the skill of saying everything and nothing at the same time. When a manager is winning, that clinical, data-driven detachment makes him look like a genius tactician. You know, think of early Pep Guardiola.
Oh, for sure.
But when you are losing 4-0 and you are lecturing angry fans about XG variance, you look completely delusional. You are gaslighting the people who are watching the catastrophe with their own eyes.
It's the moment a manager loses not just the dressing room, but the press room. Once the media and the fans realize your explanations no longer align with the physical reality of the pitch, your authority just evaporates.
But, you know, Slot's clinical nature wouldn't be so jarring if the fan base wasn't suffering from such extreme emotional whiplash.
Right, the contrast is huge.
We have to look at the ghosts haunting Anfield right now. Because the current regime isn't just feeling in a vacuum, they're being suffocated by the shadow of what came before them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is terrifying for a fan base to watch 9 years of historical progress dismantled in 8 months.
Yes.
The fans are measuring Arne Slot against the immediate glorious past of Jürgen Klopp and the dark, distant past of Brendan Rodgers, and he is failing both comparisons spectacularly.
Let's start with the ghost of Klopp. Because there was a viral post in the community focusing on Pep Guardiola's touchline demeanor during this 4-0 thrashing.
Oh, I saw this.
Under Klopp, the dynamic between Liverpool and City was famously described as iron sharpens iron, right? Klopp pushed Pep to his absolute frantic, neurotic best.
Pep used to stalk the touchline against Liverpool, visibly stressed, constantly tweaking tactics.
Yes. But during this match, fans noticed Pep just looked relaxed.
One user commented that Pep was brushing Liverpool off like a slightly annoying fly.
Ouch.
Think about the psychological damage that inflicts on a fan base. For 9 years, they were the most feared entity in European football. They were the one team that could make a state-backed juggernaut like Manchester City bleed.
And now?
To go from being the apex predator to a minor inconvenience represents a total loss of status within the ecosystem of the sport.
The psychological regression is absolute, from doubters to believers, all the way back to believers to doubters.
It really is.
But it's the statistical regression that really paints the bleakest picture for me. Let's pull up the numbers regarding the Brendan Rodgers era.
These are grim.
The sources show that Liverpool has now lost 15 matches across all competitions this season. That is the worst run since the infamous 2014-2015 season under Brendan Rodgers, where they lost 18 matches.
This is where context is vital and why the fans are so enraged. When Brendan Rodgers lost 14 matches in his first 50 games of that season, you have to look at the squad he was working with.
Right.
He had just lost Luis Suarez. He was trying to replace generational output with players like Ricky Lambert and Mario Balotelli. He had a massive structural deficit in talent.
Exactly. And Arne Slot has hit 14 losses in just 47 games, but look at his resources. The club's ownership group, FSG, has spent roughly £400 million on top-tier talent over the last couple of windows.
Right. Rodgers had the mitigation of severely limited resources. Slot is operating with a massive financial war chest and is actually producing a worse return on investment.
But hold on, let me stop you there. Because there is a massive paradox staring us right in the face regarding Arne Slot.
Okay, what is it?
If we look at the raw data before this City match, Slot technically possessed a top 4 all-time win rate for Liverpool managers, sitting around 60.58%. He won the Premier League title in his first season.
He did.
So shouldn't that buy him immense goodwill? Shouldn't a title win grant him the time to rebuild?
In a vacuum, yes. But sports fans don't live in vacuums, They live in context. The community has heavily asterisked that statistic. In the threads, they constantly refer to Slot's first season as the Fugazi run.
The Fugazi run. It's such a perfect, cynical descriptor. Explain the mechanics of why they view his title win as fake.
Well, the prevailing theory among the fan base and tactical analysts actually tend to agree with this, is that Slot won that title using Jürgen Klopp's squad, Klopp's foundational ethos, and the residual lingering momentum of the previous era.
So it wasn't really his team yet.
Right. The players were still running on Klopp's tactical muscle memory. As soon as that muscle memory faded and Slot had to fully implement his own vegan ball tactics and transition the squad's psychology, the wheels completely sheared off.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So inheriting a masterpiece is actually a trap.
It can be.
Winning the league with someone else's blueprints makes your own architectural failures look exponentially worse when you finally try to build the extension yourself.
Precisely. Think about it. If you take over a relegation-threatened team and fail, people say the job was too toxic.
Right, not your fault.
But if you are handed the keys to a finely tuned championship-winning Ferrari and you drive it into a ditch within 18 months, you cannot blame the car. The blame falls entirely on the driver.
Which naturally shifts the spotlight away from the manager and directly onto the people who hired the driver in the first place.
Right.
Because you don't spend £400 million to break a championship-winning foundation unless there is a massive structural rot at the board level. The fans are directing immense vitriolic anger at the ownership, Fenway Sports Group, and their sporting director, Richard Hughes.
You can only scapegoat the manager for so long before the structural deficiencies of the club's recruitment strategy become impossible to ignore. The fans are accusing FSG and Hughes of borderline negligent squad building.
Let's look at the specifics of that negligence because it is staggering. Liverpool entered this season, a season where they were defending the Premier League title, mind you, with only 2 or 3 fit senior center backs.
It's unbelievable.
Meanwhile, fans are pointing across the league to Arsenal, who boast a roster of 7 highly capable center backs they can endlessly rotate to keep fresh. How does a data-driven ownership group make such a glaring mathematical error?
It suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of the physical toll of modern football. The Premier League, combined with the new expanded Champions League format and the domestic cups, requires a squad to play upwards of 60 high-intensity matches a year.
That's a massive physical burden.
It is. Depth is no longer a luxury. It is a structural imperative for survival. You need 2 starting caliber players for every single position.
Right.
Liverpool went into a grueling campaign, structurally bankrupt in the single most critical area at the pitch, the center of defense.
And the clearest, most tragic casualty of that structural bankruptcy is the captain, Virgil van Dijk.
Oh, the Van Dijk situation is so sad.
The statistics coming out of the community regarding his decline are genuinely shocking.
Yeah.
We were talking about a player who, at his peak, was literally an immovable object.
The best in the world.
Exactly. But the stats show that Van Dijk has conceded 4 penalties in 46 appearances this season. To put that in perspective, he conceded 4 penalties in his first 8 years at the club, spanning 319 appearances.
This is where we really have to look at the mechanics of a decline. The simplistic view is just to say, well, Van Dijk is 34 years old, his legs have gone, he is washed.
Right. That's the easy answer.
But if you look deeper into the tactical ecosystem, it's a classic chicken and egg scenario. Is his sharp decline purely biological? Or is it a direct, unavoidable consequence of Arne Slot's terrible out-of-possession coaching?
Talk me through that. How does the midfield structure specifically force a center back to concede a penalty?
Okay, think back to our discussion of vegan ball and the hesitation in the midfield. Under Klopp, the midfield was a steel trap. Fabinho and Henderson would disrupt the pass before it ever reached the back line.
Right, they were a shield.
Under Slot, the midfield structure, which is often this disconnected double pivot, acts like a stretched bungee cord. As soon as the forward line pushes up to half-heartedly press, the midfield gets bypassed with a single pass.
Oof.
This leaves a massive, gaping hole in the center of the pitch.
So opposing attackers like Erling Haaland or Bukayo Saka are receiving the ball with time, space, and a full head of steam running directly at the center backs.
Exactly. Why does a world-class center back dive in and concede a penalty? Because he is late.
Right.
Why is he late? Because he is reacting to a forward who already has maximum momentum. Van Dijk is being left utterly exposed, repeatedly forced into one-on-one foot races in massive expanses of space.
That sounds exhausting.
And it is. Furthermore, because of the terrible squad building by Richard Hughes, there is zero rotational depth. Van Dijk is being forced to play every single minute of every single competition. He is physically exhausted, tactically unprotected, and mentally frazzled by the team's ongoing collapse.
It's a recipe for disaster. And yet, despite the glaring tactical exposure, despite the historically bad run of form, the ownership's backing of Arne Slot has been bizarrely steadfast.
It really has.
Fans in the community are absolutely baffled. Why wasn't he sacked back in November or December? I mean, they took heavy beatings from teams like Wolves. They got completely humbled 3-0 at Anfield by a Nottingham Forest team managed by Sean Dyche.
Yeah, that was a low point.
If you are losing 3-0 at home to Sean Dyche, alarm should be ringing.
The refusal to act in November is the crux of the fans' anger toward FSG. It represents a total paralysis of leadership. But if you look at the corporate psychology of modern sports ownership, it makes a twisted sort of sense.
Wait, really? How?
It's a textbook case of the sunk cost fallacy mixed with PR gaslighting.
How so? Explain that.
Well, as one fan in the threads astutely pointed out, the club's executives spent months aggressively briefing friendly journalists that Arne Slot was a long-term project, that he had their full, unwavering backing.
Ah, right. Setting the narrative.
If you fire a manager just months after giving him a massive contract and pushing all that positive PR, the board looks incredibly incompetent. They tried to ride out the storm to protect their own reputations, hoping variants would swing back in their favor.
And in doing so, they sacrificed the entire season.
Exactly.
But the real danger here isn't just writing off the 2025-2026 season. The real terror is how this radioactive environment impacts the future. The community is already looking ahead to the summer and asking a very valid question.
Which is?
Why would any top managerial prospect want to inherit this specific mess? Xabi Alonso has been heavily linked, but if you are Alonso, look at what you are walking into.
It is a highly toxic, deeply unappealing proposition. You aren't inheriting Klopp's mentality monsters. You are inheriting Slot's exhausted, fractured dressing room.
Right.
You have a squad with decimated morale. You have key defensive players like Ibrahima Konate and Joe Gomez running down their contracts, heavily rumored to be leaving on free transfers.
Which means replacing them will cost even more money.
Exactly. You have an aging core with Mohamed Salah and Van Dijk showing steep declines. The required rebuild is no longer just tweaking a few positions. It is a massive, multi-year demolition project.
So if you're a fan sitting in the middle of this crater, the manager speaking in spreadsheets, the players are swapping shirts at 4-0 down, the ownership is paralyzed by their own PR, and the future looks incredibly bleak.
It's a nightmare.
When the anger burns out and all the structural fixes seem impossible, what is left for a sports community? How do they cope?
Historically, when a sports community hits the absolute bottom of the emotional barrel, all that remains is gallows humor, the mocking laughter of your enemies, and finally a deeply unsettling apathy.
Let's talk about the gallows humor, because the memes coming out of this subreddit are both hilarious and a tragic coping mechanism.
They are so creative.
We mentioned Sustainable Football Club earlier, but they've also branded Slot's tactics as the 3 Rs. which they bluntly define as rubbish.
The three.
Yeah, it's a play on reducing, reusing, recycling, because all the team does is endlessly recycle possession without any end product.
Humor is the mind's way of dulling trauma. When you can no longer rationally analyze why a 400 million pound squad is failing so miserably, you turn it into a joke. It gives the community a shared language of suffering.
Right.
But what stings even more than their own jokes is the schadenfreude pouring in from rival fan bases.
Oh, the rivals are having an absolute feast. The sources show Arsenal fans invading the Reddit threads, calling this fixture the Cuck Derby.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are furious because they are in a title race with Manchester City, and they feel Liverpool just rolled over, offering zero resistance and happily fed City confidence and goal difference.
It's a brutal way to look at it, but accurate.
And then you have the Manchester United fans who are practically throwing a parade in the comments.
And the crowning image of that rival joy was actually captured by the broadcast cameras. Sir Alex Ferguson himself was spotted in the VIP boxes at the Etihad for this 4-0 thrashing.
No way.
Yeah, he was wearing a United tie, sitting back, and just happily hate-watching Liverpool's demise.
When Sir Alex Ferguson is showing up to your games purely to be entertained by your suffering, you have officially reached rock bottom in English football. It's the ultimate indignity.
It really is.
But what's truly fascinating, and what should genuinely terrify the executives at FSG, is the psychological shift happening right now regarding Liverpool's upcoming fixtures.
They have a brutal run of games approaching.
They really do. They have to travel away to Everton for a Merseyside derby. They have an away fixture at Old Trafford against Manchester United. But most dauntingly, they have a trip to Paris to face Paris Saint-Germain in the quarterfinals of the Champions League.
And this is where the fan sentiment gets incredibly dark. I was reading through these threads expecting fans to be rallying, saying, we have to bounce back against PSG.
Yeah, you'd think they'd want a redemption arc.
But they aren't.
No, they aren't. Because the final stage of sports grief is apathy. Segments of the fan base are not just dreading the PSG game. They are actively, openly hoping that Kylian Mbappe and PSG absolutely destroy them.
They are actively praying for a public humiliation.
Yes, because the atmosphere has morphed into complete resignation. The fans believe the ownership group is so blind, so stubborn, and so paralyzed by the sunk cost fallacy we discussed earlier that they will never fire Arne Slot proactively.
Right.
The fans believe the only way to force FSG's hand is if the team suffers a defeat so catastrophic, so globally embarrassing on the Champions League stage that the board has absolutely no choice but to pull the trigger.
I really want you listening to think about the tragic irony of that for a second. These are fans who spend thousands of pounds a year following this club.
Dedicating their lives to it.
They love this institution so desperately, and they are so desperate for a cure to this rot, that they are actively cheering for the disease to run its absolute worst course.
It's so twisted.
They want to be publicly humiliated on the biggest stage in Europe just to force a hard reset. They want to burn the house to the ground because they believe it's the only way they'll ever be allowed to pour a new foundation.
It is the ultimate symptom of a broken social contract. When fans believe the people in charge are fundamentally incapable of making the right footballing decisions, they stop hoping for wins and start relying on crisis to force change.
Exactly.
So let's step back and look at the sprawling wreckage we've unpacked today. We set out to trace the anatomy of a sporting collapse, and we found a failure at every conceivable level of the institution.
At every level.
We started on the pitch, where the physical manifestation of apathy looks like an 80 million pound striker swapping shirts at 4-0 down, signaling a total loss of pride and situational awareness.
Right, and we moved to the press room where a manager alienated his own supporters by hiding behind XG spreadsheets, completely failing to provide the emotional accountability a fan base demands.
We examined the tactical framework of vegan ball, showing how a rigid, risk-averse system neutered the team's attack and repeatedly exposed an aging, unprotected Virgil van Dijk.
And we looked up into the boardroom where an ownership group, paralyzed by their own PR and a profound sunk cost fallacy, refused to act, providing inadequate squad depth and basically dooming the season.
And all of this is playing out while the ghosts of past glory, the visceral, emotional intensity of Jürgen Klopp's era watch from the sidelines, serving as a constant, suffocating reminder to the fans of exactly how far they've fallen.
It is a comprehensive systemic failure across every single metric of a sporting institution.
And for you listening, whether you were a die-hard football fan, a casual observer, or someone who couldn't care less about sports, why does this matter?
Because this collapse is a masterclass in the absolute fragility of culture.
Exactly. Whether you are running an elite sports dynasty, managing a Fortune 500 company, or just organizing a local community project, culture is the invisible glue holding the entire enterprise together.
It is.
You can have 400 million pounds in elite talent. You can have state-of-the-art data analytics. But the moment leadership loses its connection to the emotional heartbeat of the people involved, the moment that social contract is violated, the entire structure will collapse.
And as we've seen today, it doesn't just collapse, it collapses ugly. Culture is not self-sustaining. It requires constant, vigilant maintenance.
Right.
You cannot simply inherit it and expect it to survive without nurturing the underlying values that created it.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked at the very beginning about how a massive structural failure is rarely a sudden crack, but rather a slow, agonizing erosion.
Yeah.
When a leader inherits a beautifully engineered, well-oiled, highly successful machine, are they somehow inevitably destined to break it just to prove the machine belongs to them?
That is a great question.
And when the wheels finally inevitably fall off, who is really to blame? Is it the person driving the machine into the ditch, or the people who handed them the keys and stubbornly refused to take them back when the crashing started? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.